All right, so we've done attributes. That means adding values, more properties to an element. So taking this table as a case study, let's go back to our previous introduction. We have two major parts. We have three major parts of a. We have three major parts: the content layer, which is the HTML, and the presentation layer, where we make modification and the behavior aspect of it. So now let's take an illustration. If I have, if I have, if I ask you to, if I ask you to draw a car, if I ask you to draw, for example, a van, if I ask you to draw a van now for me and color it red, for instance, and color it red, and also draw probably a cylinder and color it black. You don't first color it. Rather, you first of all draw the outline first, isn't it? So we'll draw the outline. So let's say we've made the outline now. We've made the outline of this now. It's that then we can now color it, right? So the same thing happens at this point. Then we'll now talk of coloring, making colors, isn't it? So now I can now make colors very well. I guess I can draw. So the instruction was to make this one red. Then instruction was also to make this one black. So have you seen I've achieved it now? So same way. When you come to your code, let's start afresh and take an illustration. When you come to your code now, you have series of HTML tags, and so on and so forth. So for all these things now are HTML tags, right? So for us to modify anything, first of all, we need to select it. And when we need to select it, and then give the instruction of how we want it to look. That's it. So this takes us to what CSS. What I want us to treat now. Adding CSS to our HTML. So when you want to add CSS, there are three major ways we can add CSS to our HTML code. First of all, either we use external CSS or we use internal CSS or we have inline. So the advantages and disadvantages of each one will be for another day. So, but let's see how we implement this thing. Each of them should work properly, but the order of precedence, that means if I add a style in external sheet and also come to inline and modify it, the computer will take this one first, will take the inline first before taking this. So for example, if I have an element, for example, P now, and I say that this P should be blue in my external sheet, and I come over to my internal sheet and say that this P now should be red, for instance, the computer will pick this one first and forget this one. So this is the order. If I do the same here, if I make this one, maybe select the PB. Which other color do I know now? Black. What will happen? It will pick this one over this. So this is the last. External style sheet is the last to be picked in the order of cascading style sheet. So now let's see how each of these things work. If we want to implement this, so let's take, for example, let's write a fresh code now. Remember, if you want to create your HTML file, just type exclamation mark, enter. It will generate it for you. Let me say table Let's take it to the table format. Table pages. So now, remember, if you want to create a table, what do you simply do? You simply use what? The keyword table. The keyword word table, and we close it. We close our table, right? So the next thing we are going to do is we create our rows, right? Okay, I've taught you table head. You can choose to make, I will have a table head, and give it a table head, and that's it. Then we'll have our TD. So now let's make some table rows. So now, when we implement this now, this table now, you can see something. This table is empty. This table is empty now. Can you see that the table is somehow empty, right? So this is the table now. So let's go again. If we want to modify this thing to look beautiful, we have drawn just like what we've just done now is just like we finally succeeded in drawing this thing, drawing the empty of this. So now if we want to color it according to the instruction, we'll now go and pick our color, right? So at this point now, we have gotten the structure, which is our table, the way we want it. So now, first of all, we want to modify it. If you want to make any modification on this, it's either you add an attribute here. Remember where you place your attribute. In between the first type, you add a series of attributes here. Or we use a CSS. So how do we make use of this CSS now? There are three ways we could make this way of CSS. There are three ways we could make use of CSS, which are the internal, these are the internal, external, internal, inline, and external, inline, internal, and inline. So let's go over there and see. Now, what is this external? Okay, let's start from inline. External. Now, if I want to use an external sheet, if I want to use an external sheet, that means I will create a separate file. We'll just create a separate file. We'll create a separate file, call it anything, STL. You save it. This time around, you are saving it as what? .css, or you look for cascaded style sheet. Can you see CSS now? I've saved this thing as .css, and that is it. So the implication is, I want to modify this table, right? Then I can now write all my CSS code here. But the question, how will the computer know that whatever the instruction I'm giving at this external sheet that is meant for this? Remember, you must locate where you want to, what you want to adjust. So that leads us to a tag called link. This link must be added in between the head. You see that I add it after the title or before the title, any place you like, you place it, provided that you do what? Provided that you add it. So now, if I write link now, if I create link, that means I'm telling the computing device to link, then ref, style sheet, and the rest. So can you see this thing? I've linked this CSS file. This is the location of the file. You get it? So anything I implement, any CSS code I implement here now, it's not possible to do what? To affect this. So for example, now, let me just write something like, of course, head H1, for instance. H1. And this is what I've written now. If you check it in plain, it's still plain, right? If you check it properly, find out that it's plain. This is just plain, right? So I want to make this thing. I want to change the color of this thing to red, probably. I want to change it to red, for instance. There are 3 ways I can do it. If I want to use a standard sheet, I must have linked this thing now. Then write CSS code. Just like HTML is made up of tags. If I write tags program here, it will flag it as an error. So what are the rules of CSS? The rules of CSS is simple. The syntax is simply what? You write the selector and your declaration. Selector and declaration. Inside that declaration, that means you give it a property and give it a value. It's as simple as that. Give it a property, give it a value. You are simply telling the computing device, please go and look for anywhere you can see H1. When you've seen the H1 now, that means you have selected it. Give it a, change the property of that H1 to this. That means which property are we changing? Color, for instance, blue. Font size, for instance, change it to 12 pixels. I can add other ones. I can do like alt text alignment, make it center. So let's make an implication of this now. So let's say that H1 isn't it? Remember the syntax, you open your curly bracket, then this is it now. Font family, font size. So these are the things I've written for my what H1. You can see now it has implemented. Let's check it now. Have you seen it has implemented? If I change that into red now, it will work. If I change it to red, now, it will still change back. So this is it. Now, I'm not to clarify you now. If I remove this, if I mistakenly remove this thing, that is the end of whatever I've written. It will change back to default. That means the HTML no longer have effect on it. It's as simple as that. So apart from the standard way of adding, so that means apart from the standard way of adding it, apart from the standard way, we can use what we call inline. How do we get that inline? It's as simple as ABC. So for you to get inline, for us to get inline now, inline means, let me delete this. If you don't want to use this now, external, you want to use inline. Still in between the head. It must be in between the head. You place style. You write this word style now. You close it. So now let's do the same thing we just did now. You can, okay, let me pick the paragraph. I will pick paragraph, right? And that means I'll select that. Remember the selector, then the declarations. What are declarations of this one? The font family, you give it array. The font size, you give it this, and so on. And there are a lot of syntaxes. So if we go over to can you see now? If you go over to this place now, this is what we have. This is our, let me change the color so that it will be evident. Font color. Okay. Let me make it I'm using that the color have changed. So the color have changed and other thing. Then let's try modifying this table. Let's modify the table. Okay, let's do the last one now before we modify. I'm still assuming we don't need this thing now. We don't need it to be there. So we want to implement using, we want to change the color of this particular thing using what? The inline style sheet. How do you do this one? Just come in between the first one and make a space. Write style equals to open bracket. You start giving it a value. So we want the width of this thing to increase, for instance. Want it to be auto. Then you place your semicolon, meaning that you are done with that particular declaration. Go to the next declaration. Let's give it a color. Let's give it a color. What color should we pick now? Let's pick blue. I see right. My declaration are done. Is done. Let me pick the text align. Align. Let me make it to be in center. Center. And that is it. I guess. Okay, this is right. Let's go over to our one. Have you seen now? This has been implemented. Okay. Now, let's now go to modification. Now, when we've understood this now, let's try modifying our table because that's the main thing. For your exam, there is normally 80%, 90% of the time is for you to modify this table according to the instruction that I've given you. So, since you've understood this now, I will pause the video and the next one will strictly work on modifying a table to suit most of the exam scenarios.